James, a soldier from Earth, stood on the cold surface of the alien planet. His boots crunched softly against the rocky ground as he looked around, taking in the strange, unfamiliar landscape. The sky above was a dark shade of purple, and the air had a sharp, metallic taste. He was far from home, part of a mission to help resolve a long-standing conflict between two alien species. But James wasn't just a soldier, he was part of a team that was trying to bring peace to a galaxy. On the brink of war, his new assignment was unlike any other he had experienced. He had been briefed on many things, but nothing could prepare him for what lay ahead. He would be working with an alien guide, a woman named Kira. She was a member of one of the factions, and her role was to help the humans understand the alien culture. It was vital for the peace talks. But it also meant James would spend a lot of time with Kira, learning from her and following her lead. The first time he saw her, James wasn't sure what to think. She wasn't like any woman he had ever met. Kira was unlike the Earth women James was used to, and he could tell right away she wasn't human. She stood tall, with smooth, pale skin that had a bluish hue. Her eyes were large and almost glowing, giving her an otherworldly look. Her long, dark hair was pulled back into a tight braid, and her clothes were simple but functional. The whole appearance made her seem somewhat intimidating, but it wasn't just her physical appearance that threw James off, it was the way she carried herself. Kira had a serious, guarded look in her eyes, and she didn't smile much. James had heard that alien species often had different customs, but he didn't expect this kind of coldness from his guide. Still, he knew his mission was important, and he pushed aside his nervousness, focusing on the task at hand. "We leave at dawn," Kira said in a calm, controlled voice. Her accent was different from anything James had heard before, but it was clear enough. She wasn't making small talk. "I'll show you the land. You will need to understand it if we are to succeed." James nodded, still unsure of how to act around her. He wanted to be respectful, but her distance made it hard for him to know what she expected of him. He was used to working with his fellow soldiers, but this was different. Kira wasn't a soldier. She was someone from a completely different world with her own customs, her own expectations, and her own fears. "I'm ready," James replied, trying to keep his voice steady. He wanted to make a good impression, especially considering the high stakes of the mission. But as they walked together, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the silence between them. The first part of the journey was slow, as Kira led him through a rocky terrain that seemed endless. They crossed alien fields dotted with strange plants, some of which moved as if alive, reacting to their presence. James tried not to stare, but the world around him was so different from Earth that he couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed. He had seen plenty of alien landscapes in videos, but being here in person was a whole other experience. As they moved forward, James noticed that Kira seemed tense. Her body was stiff, her movements precise and calculated. It was as if she was always on edge, always alert. He wondered if this was just how aliens were, or if something more was bothering her. "I've heard of your people," Kira said suddenly, her voice breaking the silence. "The humans who came before you. They was strong, but they also brought destruction." There was a bitterness in her tone, though it was subtle. James didn't know how to respond. He had heard of humans being viewed with suspicion by many alien races, but he didn't know the full history. Instead, he chose to listen. "We're here to help," he finally said, choosing his words carefully. "That's why we're here. We want peace, not war." Kira glanced at him for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she were measuring his sincerity. "I don't believe that peace is possible for us. Your people are new, and you don't understand the way we live. But I'll help you for now." Her words were cryptic, but James didn't press her further. He had no idea what was going on in her mind, but he knew he had to do his best to earn her trust. As they continued walking, he noticed how careful she was with every step. She was not just a guide. She was a warrior with instincts that were sharp, much sharper than his own. And James began to realize that this mission wasn't just about diplomacy, it was about survival. For both of them, by the time the sun began to set, they had reached a clearing at the base of a massive alien structure. Kira stopped and turned to face James. "We'll camp here tonight," she said. "Tomorrow we will begin the real work." James nodded, trying to hide his exhaustion. He had no idea what the next day would bring, but he knew he had to be ready for anything. Kira had a lot of trust to give, and he had to earn it starting now. As they set up camp, James couldn't help but wonder what the next steps would be. Would he be able to bridge the gap between the humans and the aliens? Would Kira see him as an ally or just another soldier? Only time would tell, but he was determined to find out. The morning came too quickly. James woke to the sound of strange birds chirping in the distance, their calls echoing through the cold air. He stretched, trying to shake off the stiffness in his muscles. Kira was already up, standing near the fire they had built the night before. She was focused, her eyes scanning the horizon as she prepared for the day ahead. There was no sign of fatigue in her movements, just quiet determination. James gathered his gear and joined her by the fire. He noticed the way she worked. Every motion was precise, deliberate, as if she was always prepared for something. It made him wonder what kind of life she had lived and why she seemed so guarded. "You ready?" Kira asked, her voice breaking through. His thoughts? She didn't wait for an answer before turning to start walking. James quickly followed her, trying not to fall behind. The path ahead was rugged and difficult. The terrain had turned from rocky to soft, uneven soil that sank under their feet. The further they went, the more alien the landscape became. Trees with strange, bright blue leaves towered over them, casting shadows that seemed to move as the light changed. James couldn't help but stare at the oddity of it all. He had read about alien planets, but nothing could have prepared him for seeing one in person. Kira led the way without speaking. She moved like a shadow, as if she was a part of the land itself. But there was something about her demeanor that made James feel like she wasn't fully present. Her posture was stiff and her eyes never seemed to relax. It was as if she was on edge, waiting for something to happen. James found it hard to ignore the tension that seemed to follow her every step. Finally, after what felt like hours of walking, Kira stopped. She turned to face James, her gaze colder than it had been the night before. "We need to talk," she said, her tone heavy with something James couldn't place. James took a step closer, his curiosity growing. "What about?" "The mission," Kira replied, her voice lowering. "You don't know what this planet is like. You don't know what we go through, what we've had to endure. And you don't know what this mission really means." James frowned, confused. He had assumed that his mission here was to help bring peace between two alien factions. He had no idea there was more to it than that. Kira sighed and shook her head. "It's not just about peace. The truth is, your people are not welcomed here. My people, we have our own way of life. And this whole thing, this alliance, it's not something we want, but we're forced into it. And now, you're here." James felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard rumors about how humans were viewed by other species, but hearing it from Kira made it real. "You don't want peace?" he asked cautiously, trying to understand her. Kira's eyes softened for a brief moment, but the coldness quickly returned. "It's not that simple. We've been forced to live with constant conflict. And now, you're asking us to change, to trust in a system that has never worked for us. And in return, we're expected to participate in your customs, including the mating ritual." James blinked, not fully grasping what she was saying. "Mating ritual?" Kira took a step back, her face hardening again. "Yes, where I come from, it's part of the alliance process. The act of bonding between different species is seen as a symbol of peace, but it's not something I want to do." "It's not something any of us want to do?" James felt his stomach twist. He had heard of these rituals, but he never thought he'd be part of one. It was hard to imagine Kira, who had been so distant and cold, being involved in something so personal. "I understand," James said slowly. "I didn't ask for this either. I'm here to help, to make sure things don't go wrong. And if it means I have to participate in some ritual, I will. But you don't have to do it alone." Kira looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and confusion. "You don't understand. You're a human. You're different." You won't see me the same way after this. You'll see me as just another alien, just another tool for peace. That's what this is all about, using our bodies to form alliances. James could feel the weight of her words. He had always been taught that peace was the highest goal. But the thought of becoming part of someone else's culture, even in a way that felt wrong, made him question his place in this mission. I'm not like that, James said quietly, stepping closer to Kira. I see you as an individual, not just as a tool or a symbol. I won't let this ritual change how I see you. Kira didn't say anything for a long time. She simply stared at her eyes searching his face for something she could trust. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer than before. You might be different from the others, but it doesn't change what's expected of us. James wanted to say more, but Kira had already turned away, her face hardening again as she resumed walking. James followed, his thoughts racing. What was he really getting into? How could he help Kira and the others when the task seemed so impossible? As they continued on, the weight of the situation pressed heavily on his shoulders. The mission had just begun, but already it felt like they were standing on the edge of something far more complicated than he had ever imagined. The sun had barely risen the next day when Kira and James arrived at the large gathering site. It was a place set aside for important events, surrounded by towering alien structures made from smooth, silver-like material. The air was thick with anticipation, and James could feel the weight of the moment settling around him. This wasn't just another diplomatic mission. This was something far more personal, and Kira had made it clear that both of them were about to be tested in ways they hadn't expected. As they approached the central platform, James could see that they weren't alone. Other aliens, members of Kira's race, were already gathered in a wide circle. They were watching him closely, their eyes filled with curiosity and judgment. Kira walked ahead of him, her steps steady but tense. Her face was hard, showing little emotion. James couldn't help but wonder if this was the same Kira who had been his guide only a day ago. She seemed almost like a different person now, guarded, defensive, and distant. The leaders of Kira's race stood at the front, their eyes focused on James. One of them, a tall alien with dark green skin and sharp features, stepped forward and raised a hand. The crowd went silent immediately. We are here to witness the union of two species. The leader spoke, his voice echoing in the stillness. It is through this ritual that we hope to create lasting peace. The human and the Kira will bond in the presence of the people, and it is through this act that our alliance will be sealed. James nodded, though his stomach churned. He hadn't signed up for this kind of ritual. He had come here thinking his job was about negotiations, about peace talks, not about participating in something so personal. He glanced at Kira, but she wasn't looking at him. Her gaze was fixed straight. Ahead, her expression unreadable. Step forward, the leader said, motioning for them both to move closer. Kira walked first, with James following closely behind. They reached the center of the platform, where an altar-like structure stood. It was made from strange, glowing stones, and the air around it seemed to hum with energy. Kira stopped just before it, turning slightly to face James. Her posture was stiff, and she didn't meet his eyes. James felt a pang of sympathy for her. She hadn't wanted this. Neither of them had. But the weight of tradition and culture was forcing them into a situation neither of them could escape. The leader of the ceremony raised both hands and spoke again. The bonding ceremony must begin. Both parties will now acknowledge their commitment to the peace process. James didn't fully understand what was meant by bonding, but he could tell from the way the others were watching that it was important. Kira took a deep breath, clearly nervous. She stepped closer to James, her movements hesitant. "Look at me," she whispered to him, her voice barely audible over the low murmur of the crowd. James met her gaze, offering her a reassuring smile, but Kira didn't smile back. Instead, she lowered her head, her eyes flicking briefly toward the ground. James could feel the tension between them. This wasn't just about politics, it was about their personal boundaries being tested, stretched by a ceremony neither of them wanted. The alien leader, noticing the quiet moment, gestured for them to proceed. You must take part in this act, or the peace talks will be seen as null and void, the leader said coldly. Kira's shoulders tightened. She looked up at James again, her expression raw with uncertainty. I have no choice, she said softly. James hesitated for a moment, his mind racing. He wasn't sure what this ritual involved, but he could see that Kira was scared. Her fear was palpable, and the weight of the situation hung heavily in the air. He wasn't sure what was expected, but he knew he had to try and make it easier. For her, he didn't want to be part of something that would make her feel even worse. As if reading his thoughts. Kira took a step back and squared her shoulders. She turned to face the crowd, her posture more rigid than before. Let's get this over with, she said. Her voice steady but cold. James took a deep breath and stepped forward, closer to Kira. He wasn't sure what was supposed to happen next, but he could see that the others were waiting. They were waiting for him to do something, to act in a way that would solidify the alliance between their species. James felt the eyes of the entire group on him, their expectations heavy on his shoulders. Do not fear, the alien leader said again. This is the way. The ritual will bring balance. James nodded, though the words did little to ease his growing anxiety. He felt a strange mixture of emotions: nervousness, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the future of both their worlds, and if this ritual was the price of peace, then it was a price he had to pay. He turned to Kira, who stood before him like a statue. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of something, perhaps resignation, perhaps something deeper. James didn't know what to say, but he knew that whatever happened next, they would have to face it together. The leader of the ceremony motioned for them to move forward. Kira and James stepped into the center of the platform, the crowd watching closely, and James could feel the weight of their gazes pressing down on him. This wasn't just a ceremony, it was a test, and for better or worse, both of them had to face it. The moment felt strange. James stood there, facing Kira, surrounded by the watchful eyes of her people. The silence in the air was thick, filled with anticipation and tension. Every part of him was on edge. He had no idea what was expected of him, but he knew that Kira was just as uncomfortable as he was. He could feel the weight of the eyes on him, watching him, waiting for him to do something. But what was he supposed to do? What had he agreed to when he stepped into this alien ritual? He glanced at Kira again, but she still wouldn't meet his gaze. Her eyes were fixed straight ahead, her body tense and her posture stiff. The leader of the ceremony, a tall alien with sharp features, raised his hands again. Proceed, he said, his voice deep and commanding. The bond must be recognized. James didn't know what he was supposed to do. All he knew was that Kira didn't want this. Her reluctance was clear in her stiff movements, the tightness of her jaw, and the way she barely moved or spoke. He could feel the fear radiating from her. She's scared, James thought. She doesn't want this. Without thinking, he took a step closer to Kira, trying to show her that he wasn't going to force anything on her. His steps were slow, deliberate. He reached out, his hand hovering just a few inches from her arm. Kira, he said softly, his voice almost a whisper, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. We can figure something else out. I won't force you. For a long moment, Kira didn't respond. Her face remained unchanged, her eyes locked on the horizon, avoiding him. James could feel the pressure of the moment building. His words were sincere, but there was no easy answer. Here. There was no simple way to back out of this situation. The mission was important, and the peace talks depended on their success. Still, it didn't feel right to him. Finally, Kira turned her head slightly, her voice low. It's too late, she said, her tone carrying the weight of resignation. We've already come too far. The leaders won't allow us to stop now. If we back out, everything fails. James frowned. He knew she was right, but he also knew that forcing something on either of them wouldn't make peace. It would only create more distance. Kira's eyes finally met his, and in that moment he saw the fear, the uncertainty in them. But there was something else too. There was a kind of acceptance, I don't want this, Kira continued, her voice shaking slightly. But my people, they believe in this. They think it's the only way to guarantee peace, to show them that we are united. James sighed, feeling a knot in his stomach. He understood the weight of her words, the burden she carried. She wasn't just doing this for herself. She was doing it for her people, for the survival of her world. I get it, he said softly, his voice steady. I'll stand by you, Kira, but I don't want this to be something we're forced into. If we have to do this, then we'll do it together. You're not alone. For a moment, Kira seemed to relax. Her posture softened just slightly, and her eyes remained on James, not full of hope but of something else, perhaps trust. She nodded, barely perceptible, but enough for James to see that she was trying to find strength in his words. The leader of the ceremony took a step forward, his expression stern. The peace must be solidified. You two must perform the act of unity, for the sake of your people and ours. James felt his heart race. This was the moment when everything would either break or come together. But it wasn't just a ceremonial act. It was a test of something deeper, something between him and Kira that neither of them could deny. Are you ready? The leader asked. Kira's lips parted slightly, but she didn't say anything. She simply nodded again, though it seemed as though she was bracing herself. James felt a wave of uncertainty, but he pushed it aside. He knew Kira didn't want to go through with this, but he also knew that her people had built their entire system around these traditions. And as difficult as it was to accept, the mission depended on it. I'll go first, Kira said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was firm, but her hands were trembling slightly. James took a step back, giving her space. This wasn't his choice to make, but he respected her decision. She was the one who had the most at stake here. He would follow her lead as he always had, and hoped that, whatever happened, they would both find a way to move forward together. Kira closed her eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep breath. She turned to face James completely, and for the first time, there was something softer in her expression. Something almost human. I don't know what will happen after this, Kira said, her voice quiet but clear. But I'm doing this. For peace, for the future. James nodded, his eyes locked on hers. There was no more fear in her gaze, only determination. They didn't know what was coming, but they had to face it together. The leader of the ceremony motioned for them to proceed. The crowd fell silent, watching with bated breath as Kira and James took the final step into the unknown. It was a step toward unity, toward peace, and toward the hope that this strange ritual would be the key to their success. And in that moment, both of them knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The ceremony had been long and difficult. The eyes of the entire crowd had followed every movement, every breath that James and Kira took. James felt the weight of the ritual, the expectation, the importance of the moment, and yet, as he stood beside Kira, he still didn't fully understand what had just transpired between them. It wasn't like anything he had imagined. Now, as the crowd began to disperse, leaving James and Kira alone, the air was thick with unspoken thoughts. They walked silently back to the camp they had set up the night before, each step heavy with the events that had unfolded. Kira's eyes were downcast, her face unreadable. James couldn't help but feel a growing sense of concern for her. He knew she hadn't wanted this. He had seen it in her eyes all along. Are you okay? James asked as they stopped near the campfire, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows around them. His voice was soft, careful. Kira didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat down on the ground, her hands folding in her lap as she stared into the fire. James took a seat next to her, waiting. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he could sense that she was struggling with something deeper than just the ceremony itself. I didn't expect it to be like that, Kira said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with confusion and something else, vulnerability. I thought it would be worse. I thought it would be unbearable, but it wasn't. James listened carefully, trying to understand what she meant. He knew that Kira had been terrified of the bonding ritual, had dreaded the moment when she would have to take part in something so personal. But now, there was something in her voice that suggested her feelings were changing, perhaps shifting, in a way neither of them had expected. I'm not saying it was easy. Kira continued, her voice shaking slightly, but it wasn't what I thought it would be. I thought I would feel disgusted, but instead I felt nothing, no fear, no shame, just something else, something I can't explain. James didn't know what to say. His mind was racing, but he kept his thoughts to himself for the moment. He had seen how hard it had been for Kira, how much she had struggled with the expectations placed on her by her people. And now, hearing her speak like this, it was as if a new door had opened. But what did it mean? I never wanted this. Kira continued, her voice quieter now. I never wanted to be seen like this, to be used as a tool for peace, for an alliance. I didn't want to be a symbol, but today, I saw something in you, James. I saw something different. James felt his heart race at her words. He turned to face her fully, his expression sincere. What do you mean? Kira hesitated, taking a deep breath before speaking. I don't know what it is, but when I looked at you during the ritual, I saw more than just a human soldier. I saw someone who understood, someone who wasn't just here to do a job. I saw someone who cared. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was just an alien, just a tool to be used. I felt like I mattered. Her words hit James like a wave. He had always known that this mission was important, that the fate of the peace talks rested on both of their shoulders. But hearing Kira speak like this, it changed everything. She wasn't just an alien guide anymore. She wasn't just a symbol for peace. She was someone real. Someone who had fears, hopes, and desires just like him. I never wanted to make you feel like that, James said, his voice thick with emotion. I know this whole thing has been hard for you. I didn't come here to force you into anything. I just wanted to help. I wanted to be your ally, not your enemy. Kira turned to look at him fully, her eyes searching his face as if trying to see if he meant what he said. There was a long pause, the silence between them filled with more words that weren't spoken. Finally, Kira nodded slowly. I believe you, she said softly. I do. James felt a weight lift from his chest. He wasn't sure what had changed, but he could sense that something was different between them now. Kira had always kept her distance, both physically and emotionally. But now, as they sat together in the quiet of the alien landscape, there was a sense of understanding between them. It was a kind of connection that James hadn't expected, a bond that went beyond duty, beyond the ritual, beyond the mission itself. I'm still scared, Kira admitted, her voice barely audible. I'm still scared of what this means. What we're supposed to be, but I don't think I'm as afraid as I was before. You've shown me that it doesn't have to be the way I thought. James placed a hand gently on her shoulder. You don't have to be scared anymore. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Kira looked at him, her eyes filled with something new. Gratitude, maybe, or perhaps hope. It was a feeling James hadn't seen in her before, but it was unmistakable now. I don't know what comes next, Kira said, her voice steadier now. But I think I want to find out, with you. James smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. It was a small step, but it was a step forward. And in that moment, he realized that this mission, this strange, complicated journey wasn't just about peace talks or rituals. It was about the people, about understanding, about finding common ground, and about seeing each other for who they truly were. For the first time since arriving on this alien planet, James felt like he wasn't just part of the mission. He was part of something real. And no matter what came next, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't alone. The days after the ceremony passed quickly. But the shift between James and Kira was undeniable. What had started as an uneasy partnership was now slowly growing into something more. The tension between them, though still present at times, seemed to be replaced by something else. Trust. Kira, who had once kept her distance, began to show signs of opening up. Her sharp, defensive demeanor softened when she spoke with James, and although she still carried the weight of her people's expectations, there was a new light in her eyes. It wasn't just the political mission anymore. There was something personal, something human between them. James noticed it first one evening when they were sitting by the fire, the sky above dotted with stars. The night was quiet, the only sound the crackling of the flames. Kira, who had been staring into the fire, glanced at him suddenly, as though surprised by the thought that had crossed her mind. "You know," she began, her voice quiet but steady, "I never thought it would be like this." James tilted his head, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Us," Kira said, her hand gesturing vaguely between them. "I thought it would just be a job, a task I had to get through. But now, I don't know, it feels different." James could see the change in her. She wasn't just talking about their mission anymore. She was talking about the bond that had been formed between them. The bond that had started in the most unlikely of circumstances. "I understand," James replied, his voice sincere. "I didn't expect this either. I thought I was just here to help, to make sure things didn't fall apart. But now, it's more than that. We're in this together. And I think, in a way, that's the key to making everything work." Kira looked at him, her eyes softening as though considering his words. For a moment, the silence between them was filled with something neither of them had expected understanding. In that quiet moment, there was no longer the divide between human and alien, soldier and guide. They were simply two people trying to navigate a world full of complications. "Together, I didn't want to need anyone," Kira admitted, her voice small. "For so long I believed I had to do everything myself. My people did depend on me. They expect me to be strong, to carry the weight of their hopes. I never thought I could rely on someone else. Especially not you, not a human." James nodded, hearing the pain in her voice. "I get it. I felt the same way before, but we can't do everything alone. We're stronger together. We have to be." Kira was quiet for a long moment, her eyes drifting back to the fire. "It's hard to let go of that control, to let someone else in, but I think I'm learning. I think I'm starting to trust you." James felt a sense of relief at her words. Trust was something that had been hard to earn, especially from Kira, but now, hearing her say it made him realize just how far they had come. It wasn't just about the peace talks anymore. It was about their connection, their ability to understand one another in a way neither had expected. The next few days were filled with meetings and discussions with the alien leaders, but even as the focus shifted back to the mission, there was an unspoken understanding between James and Kira. They didn't need to speak it aloud anymore. They had formed a bond, a connection that was as real as any mission or ritual. It was something stronger than just diplomacy. It was personal. One afternoon, after a long meeting with the Alien Council, Kira took James aside. The weight of the day had left both of them drained, and they were sitting under the shade of a tall tree, the cool breeze making the leaves above them rustle softly. "James," Kira said, her voice soft but serious, "I know this mission isn't over. There's still a long way to go, and I know there are many challenges ahead. But I want you to know that whatever happens, I'm glad we're doing this together." James smiled, his heart lightened by her words. "Me too. It hasn't been easy, but I can't imagine doing it with anyone else. We're a team, Kira, and I believe in this." "In us." Kira looked at him for a long moment as if searching for something, and then she nodded slowly. "Yes, a team." They sat there in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of the mission still hanging over them, but for once it didn't feel as heavy. They were no longer just playing their parts in a larger political game. They had become something more, something real. And as James looked at Kira, he realized that this was more than a mission. It was about two people who had learned to trust one another, despite the odds, despite the differences between their worlds. When the time came for them to return to the council and continue the talks, there was a new energy between them. They weren't just soldiers or diplomats anymore. They were allies, partners. And as they stood side by side, ready to face whatever the future held, James knew that whatever happened next, they would face it together. Because that was the bond they had formed, one that went beyond words, beyond the mission. A bond that was theirs and theirs alone. The days following their shared moments of understanding had changed everything. The bond between James and Kira had deepened in ways neither of them had expected. The alien world around them still felt strange, but it no longer seemed so distant. Together they had faced the challenges of the mission, and together they had begun to form a connection that felt like something more than just duty. The morning sun rose over the alien landscape, casting a soft light across the strange terrain. James stood outside their small camp, looking out at the horizon. He could hear the distant hum of alien creatures and the rustling of leaves in the wind. The air was different here, with a strange yet calming scent that filled his senses. Despite the oddity of the planet, it was starting to feel more like home. Kira joined him after a few moments, walking quietly up to his side. She was more relaxed now, her movements no longer as tense and stiff as they had been in the beginning. There was a softness to her now, a sense of peace that had taken root in her heart. And James could see it in her eyes, the way she looked at him with quiet understanding, with trust. "You're quiet today," James said, breaking the silence. He turned to her, his voice gentle. "What's on your mind?" Kira looked at him, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. She had learned to smile more in the past few days, something James had noticed. It was small, but it was a change. "I'm just thinking about everything we've been through," she replied. "How much has changed, how much I've changed." James nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. It had been a whirlwind of emotions, challenges, and uncertainties. But through it all, they had found something real, something they hadn't expected. They had found each other. "I never thought I'd get to this point," Kira continued. "I thought I would always keep people at a distance. I thought I had to, but now I see things differently. I see what it means to trust, to have someone by your side." James reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "I'm glad you see that. I'm glad you trust me, Kira." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, James saw a warmth in her that he had never seen before. She wasn't just a guide, a warrior, or an alien. She was a person, someone he could relate to. She had fears, hopes, and dreams just like him. And in that moment, he realized that everything they had been through, the struggles and the awkwardness, had brought them closer. "I didn't think I would ever have this," Kira said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't think I could find someone who understood me, who didn't judge me. I didn't think I could ever feel human again." James smiled softly. "You are human. You're just like me, Kira. We may come from different worlds, but we're not so different. We have more in common than you think." Kira looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Then, without saying anything more, she leaned into him, her head resting gently on his shoulder. The gesture was simple, yet it spoke volumes. It was a moment of quiet connection, of trust, and of understanding. They stood there for a while, side by side, watching the sun climb higher into the sky. The world around them seemed to pause for a moment, as if giving them the time they needed. The peace between them felt fragile, yet strong at the same time. Finally, Kira broke the silence. "What happens now?" she asked softly, looking up at him. "What comes next for us, for this mission?" James turned to face her, his eyes filled with determination. "What happens now is that we keep going, we keep moving forward. We've already made it this far, and we've done it together. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together." Kira smiled, a sense of calm settling over her. "You're right," she said, nodding slowly. "We've already come so far, and we'll keep going. Together." It wasn't just about the mission anymore, it was about their shared journey, and no matter where it would take them, they both knew that they had something special. A bond forged not just by duty, but by understanding and trust. The alien world around them might have been strange and unfamiliar, but in that moment it didn't matter. Together they had found something worth fighting for. And in each other they had found a sense of belonging. James took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the journey ahead. There were still challenges to face, decisions to be made, and obstacles to overcome. But for the first time since arriving on this distant planet, he felt confident. They could do this. They would do this, with a final glance at the rising sun. James turned back to Kira. "Let's go," he said, his voice steady. Kira smiled, a true smile this time, and nodded. "Let's go." And as they walked together toward the unknown, they both knew that whatever the future held, they would face it side by side, united, stronger than ever before.